Well, hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Nairn, and I wanted to just present to you something which has been on the mind of the coaches that I support. And this is something that I had to learn back in 2012 when I first started doing this live, going live online, teaching, training, sharing with people ways in which they can improve themselves and to just learn in general. And this is really the key to being able to present confidently online. This is all of the summary of everything that I teach is really how can you go live and present something with a great deal of confidence? How can you teach live? How can you impact people live, which is something that my coaches want to do. And speaking of my coaches, they're mainly female coaches in their 50s, and they teach things like what you might group up as personal development, things like leadership. They want to help other coaches to move forward, and other female coaches in particular that they tend to work with to move forward to master things like leadership and to handle things like how to manage themselves emotionally. And these are the topics that they tend to cover. But what they want to be able to do when they're presenting is to lead with a great deal of confidence so that the other coaches listening to them feel like they are, in fact, learning from a leader, a master, and a person who can really impact them to do great things. And they want to do this largely online, and they want to speak to audiences that other people have already pulled together so that they use someone else's stage to grow their audience. And this really is the core of all of that when put together. How do we do this online effectively? So the first thing that coaches tend to tell me is that they feel overwhelmed by the fact that they have to get their lighting right. So we do that first. And the reason why we get the lighting right is because when that's all done and taken care of and we've got a nice clean background for them to present from, the next thing they get concerned about is, well, how do I actually handle all the technology? And so we focus their attention on the technology, finding simple systems. Now, when I say simple systems, I want to just put this all into context. 20, maybe 30 years ago, to do something like this would take a whole room in a purpose-built studio where you've got great lighting, great cameras, and you've got a crew of people, someone managing the sound, someone managing just the lighting, someone switching the cameras and making sure that the right angle is what is being used. And then there's someone conducting the whole process from a programming point of view, managing the different advert breaks and all of those things going on so that it would work like clockwork. And that doesn't even touch all the time that the talent, which is the person on screen, has to put into getting their content right, making sure they say the right words that are what we might call free to air friendly. That's the word that we use in the UK. Free to air programming is what you get on what other countries sometimes refer to as terrestrial television. And so we want to make sure that our talent is comfortable, confident, and only has to focus on presenting the information. Well, it's a little bit different when you want to speak to an audience today, especially if you are going to join someone else on their podcast where they have to bring you into that podcast environment electronically. And you now have to handle things like your own audio. When are you going to play a little video clip to your audience? You have to manage that. You also have to make sure that any aspect of the filming process with regard to your lighting, your audio, any clips that you play, any sound levels that you're managing, all of that is being done in the right way. And obviously, if you're running the podcast or the presentation or the event, you don't want to cut people off and lose them in the flow of all of what's going on. So there's so much to do, so many people to introduce and people to introduce you. And you're trying to just do that with a sense of confidence and no overwhelm. And then someone says, well, actually, we've got to change. Something has happened that we didn't expect. We haven't got a particular speaker. Now you've got to fill in. So all of this can feel quite overwhelming for the coaches that I work with. And what they're saying, Patrick, I just want a simple way to do this. And so what I do is I focus on both sides of the challenge, which I'm going to talk about today, which is not only just doing this with confidence, but what I mean by doing this is managing both the hardware, which is like your cameras, your lighting, your microphones, and then switching things around using what we call a switcher, audio visual switcher, which is going to allow you to mix different types of source material together, including live feed from yourself, and mixing all that with the audio, but then delivering that through software today. Because remember, we do this using different types of software, and that's from live streaming like this all the way through to running your own event, and using tools like Teams by Microsoft, Zoom, and then other tools that are very popular. I'm not going to name all of them. There are many of them, too many to name. But how do we kind of make all of this work together in a way that is streamlined and that the coach really feels comfortable and confident about it? So I think of this a lot like thinking of a pilot taking an aeroplane. And when I first started to learn all of this, one of the things I went through was that same sense of how do we have a checklist of things that we need to do so that when we are going live, we don't forget, for instance, to unmute ourselves. That's a simple thing. I'm sure you've been to meetings and people say, you're on mute, you're on mute, can you unmute? And it's just one of those running jokes that we've learned to accommodate over the last few years. Now, the core concept here is that for most of us is we just want to have a meeting. We're not worried about creating any flair or impact. But when you're a coach doing a presentation, you are concerned about how you're impacting people because you want to help them to achieve what it is that they say they came to you for. But the only way you could do that is if you can create a safe environment for them where you can feel confident managing everything, and you can be certain that when you push a button, they're not going to suddenly disappear from the call. And that's really what my coaches tend to say to me, Patrick. I'm most concerned about just cutting people off or pushing a button and everything disappears and the whole stream disappears. That's one of their biggest concerns. So let's talk about how we deal with that. Well, the first thing that I want to focus your attention on is, yes, I do teach this. This is what I do. I help my female coaches, and also male coaches come to me as well, to understand the tech, the underlying technology that's working. And we streamline that by creating for them a process that they walk through themselves. Every time they're going to practice and get used to the system, they walk through that. So we streamline that together. And as I mentioned first, we get them sorted with the way that they look, so that that's not in any question, any concern. They're not thinking, oh, well, how do I make sure my lighting looks good? No, we've dealt with the lighting. And then we usually, as a part of dealing with the lighting, we just deal with the sound at the same time so that the microphone sounds nice and clear, so that they have all of the tools that need to manage the sound so that it sounds nice and noise-free in the background, and that it's at the right levels so that they can feel confident that they're not too loud for their audience. They are speaking at the right level, and that whatever system they get brought into, they are not going to be louder than everybody else, provided everybody else, of course, is doing the similar observation of getting the sound levels right. And then what they're starting to focus now on is, what meeting tool am I using? How do I manage that meeting tool? There's so many different menus in it. So I kind of narrow that down to just a few options. And I've used most of the meeting tools out there. So this is not a recommendation session of, which meeting tool to use. Use the one that you feel most comfortable with. But here's what my coaches tend to want to do. They want to use the recording that they've created and repurpose it for social media. They want to repurpose it for training snippets, shorts, all of these different things that we have today to reach the world. They want to repurpose. So they're looking for really high quality. And when they record, it looks good. It's something that you can actually edit afterwards, and it's not going to look too grainy, and it doesn't depend 100% on everything that's going on around you, who's using the Wi-Fi today. No, we don't want to worry about that. We want a high quality recording. Now, depending on which tool you usually use, you'll know already whether the are. And this is one of the reasons why I recommend to people, get a nice around, you're fading in and out of the background. No, we don't want any of that. We want high quality material that we can repurpose. And so we have that clean background to begin with. But now we're getting into, sort of how to make sure that we get high quality tools, where you want something that can record in at least what we call 1080 in terms of the resolution of the vertical from top to bottom number of lines that you have being recorded. And 1080 today is, I would say, the minimum standard that we want to work with, because that gives us lots of room to crop and to change the format from one, which is the typical widescreen that most of us use, to the vertical that is becoming more and more popular every day because of mobile phones. And so you really want something that gives you at least 1080 as a recording. The other thing that you want to be able to do is to decide what gets recorded, and you want to easily be able to do that. So you want to say to your system, here's what I'm looking for. And it will say full screen recording, or it will show you an image that represents what the screen would look like. And again, most of the tools allow you to do that today, but some of them are buried in menu after menu after menu. So you want a tool that doesn't require you to go into multiple menus to find things, relatively easy for you to see things. And again, when it comes to the recording quality, to know that it is actually going to be 1080 as a minimum. And then some of the other things that you want is, of course, to be able to control how things look on screen. So you can push a button and get just yourself on screen, or you can push a button and get the gallery on screen. Now, here's where I go a little bit differently from a lot of people in terms of how I like to present. And I teach my coaches that, yes, you can use what you might call a typical meeting tool for running your events, but I specifically encourage them to look at event tools. Now, there are lots of online tools for video conferencing that fall into the events category. And what that allows you to do is to really control quite specifically who is shown on screen. Now, let me know, have you ever had a meeting that you've been in and you were intending to repurpose that content, and someone steps into the meeting, they join late, and their mic is live, or we call it hot, live mic, and then they start talking to someone else who's in the room and interrupt your meeting. They interrupt the flow of the meeting. Of course, they don't intend to do this. This is not their goal for the day, to interrupt the presentation. But sometimes a tool allows that. And so I encourage to use tools that are specifically designed around the delivery of events. And what that allows you to do is to ensure that you can control who's speaking at any time. And usually you want it just to be the main speaker. That also translates to the recording, so it only records the main speaker. The other thing is that you don't have to worry about muting people now, because the focus is on just the speaker, and the tool has been designed from the ground up to enable that. And then when you're finished your presentation and you want to talk to people again in a more informal setting, as if you've left the main stage and you've now gone into the audience and you're talking post your presentation, you can do that. And one of the tools that I use to do this is actually a tool that used to be called Remo, but it's now called Events Virtual. And that's a great tool for using to deliver any kind of event. It also allows you to live stream to other platforms, which is a great feature. But how do I bring in things such as other videos, other angles of camera? Well, you use a switcher, an audiovisual switcher, to be able to do that. And again, I teach my audience to use very simple but efficient versions of these switchers. And the thing that I like about switchers is that when they allow you to, say, output in 4K, 1080 is great, but 4K is even better when it comes to repurposing, because now you have a lot more in terms of the resolution quality to be able to adapt. So we're going to talk about some of these over the next few days, how we can use them. But the most important thing that I want you to realize is that you need to put a system together. And I've been doing this since 2012, and I have a lot of experience in this area, and I would love to help you to be able to deliver your presentations professionally and to be able to do that without all of the overwhelm. Now, it's actually warming up in my area at the moment, and I'm feeling a lot warmer now, and I'm really enjoying this warm weather. But it does mean that, the whole sort of context of your presentation might shift a little bit. I'm not going to turn on a fan at the moment because it's going to be a little bit noisy. I want you to hear a clean presentation, but I'll make some adjustments for the next live that I do. So that's all good fun. But I prefer warm than cold. So the thing is that for my coaches, they feel like anything that enhances their confidence is what they're looking for. They want to feel better about the presentation, and they want tools that are reliable, something that's easy to use, but also reliable, which is really key because you don't want a tool going down technologically failing right in the middle of your presentation, which can happen. All kinds of things can happen. So let's be realistic. We're dealing with the internet here. All kinds of things happen before your signal gets out to the world and before a signal comes to your audience. But you want something that's reliable, tools that have been around and have stood the test of time. It's a good place to start. And so every tool that I use, I've tested thoroughly and make sure that those tools work under even the toughest of conditions and that they still produce high quality. So all the tools that I use and that I recommend to my audience, they're tested, they're trusted, and they have had lots of people running on a single session, and they just work, they deliver. So simple, reliable, all of that stuff is about you. But one thing that I've learned is that you don't want to have everything running through your computer. I mean, we can buy these powerful computers, but when you have everything running through the computer, it really does change the level of reliability. And so what a lot of people are doing, which is what I do, is we use a hardware and a software solution working together. In fact, right now I'm using a combination of a hardware and a software solution. So my switcher is pushing the signal directly out to the platforms that I'm streaming to. And this gives me a lot more confidence than if I was trying to do this all through just my computer alone. And also it means that I don't have to worry about a huge, powerful setup. I can actually do this all from a relatively simple computer, even from a tablet. That keeps things really simple, but also stable, which is what we are most interested in having. And then just using simple everyday connections, such as like a HDMI cable, is not what you might call a professional standard cable. Of course, you can use it in professional settings, but it's available to the person who doesn't want to sort of put the investment in for what we might call a professional studio level type of kit and connection, just using things that people can find all around them. You can easily order them and they can be with you the same day or the next day, depending on where you live in the world. And also using switches that have been tested by multiple people in all kinds of professional situations, but that they are also cost effective enough for a coach to buy and manage. So the most important, I take my coaches through so that they can feel confident and that they use the system multiple times. And I really say to them, this is something I did years ago when I first started to be a professional photographer. In my journey to becoming that, I used to pick up my camera even when I wasn't taking any photos, and I would just get used to the camera so that I could get what we'd call muscle memory in the photographic trade. So I don't have to take my eye away from the camera to know how to make a change. And that's vital that you learn how to do this. And I talk to my coaches all the time, and I say that you do need to practice. You need to practice. It's an essential part of it. Of course, they don't always want to practice. They want to do the thing that they do. They want to interact with their audience by serving them. But you still need to do this in order to serve your audience. So we focus a lot of our attention on how we can make that fun, how we can make that a part of their everyday, so that they can go to meetings online and feel safe that everything is going to work as intended. So I could talk for a long time about this topic, and I would love to, but for now I'm just going to leave it there because I want to continue to go through this over the next couple of days or so, because I think this is vital for my audience to be able to understand how I help them to become confident and comfortable with using technology that they probably don't really look forward to using, unless, of course, it's for something where they can relax. But when they're presenting, I get them into that professional mindset. So let me ask you a question. What is it about using technology that you're most concerned about? And what would you like for me to share with you some simple ways of getting past it? Remember, this is not just about the tech. This is about putting all of this together, being able to come up with great topics to speak to your audience about things that they want to learn about, being able to put a great presentation together under professional lighting and having high quality sound so that it sounds like you're in the room beside them. But not only that, managing the tools and the technology that need your input to deliver a great presentation. Let me know what it is you'd like to hear about, and I'll make sure that I provide that in these upcoming sessions. I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to share this. This is great. And the fact that you're watching these videos, whether live or in the recorded version, thank you very much for dropping in. It's a pleasure to serve, and I never take it for granted that you've given up some of your time, the rarest commodity that we have on this planet, to come listen and learn and participate with me. Thank you very much for that. I'll see you in about another 24 hours. And as always, I want to say thank you very much, and I leave you in peace. See you soon.